It was a quiet Tuesday morning when my phone pinged with a delivery notification. Package delivered to front door, the message read. I set my coffee down and shuffled to the porch, expecting to see the familiar brown box. Nothing. My stomach twisted as I remembered what was supposed to arrive today. My court-ordered medication, the kind that kept me on the right side of my parole. I jogged to the backyard, heart pounding, and there it was smashed on the ground, the tampery VY dent label ripped like someone had chucked it over the fence with zero care. Panic hit me like a freight train. Missing even one dose could send me back to court, or worse. 3 months ago, I'd moved into Pinewood Grove, a cookie-cutter suburb where every lawn was manicured to perfection and mailboxes lined up like soldiers. I'm a low-key guy, just trying to live quietly after some legal messes in my past. I work from home, do freelance IT consulting, and keep my head down. But from the moment I rolled into this neighborhood, I caught the eye of Linda Harper, the HOA's self-proclaimed queen. Linda was in her 50s, always dressed like she was heading to a board meeting, even when she was just grabbing her mail. Her smile was all teeth, never touching her eyes, and it didn't take long to figure out she lived for control. Linda wasn't just the HOA president, she was the neighborhood's unofficial dictator. She patrolled the streets with a clipboard, her heels clicking like she was on a mission. My regular deliveries, mostly office supplies and tech gear, somehow made me her personal target. On my second day, she cornered me outside my house, while VYing that clipboard like a weapon. "I'm Linda Harper, HOA president," she said, her voice dripping with authority. "We take our community standards seriously." Translation: she saw every resident as her pet project to micromanage. It started small, like a slow drip. Linda would show up at my door, measuring tape in hand, squinting at my porch like my Amazon boxes were a blight on humanity. "These packages are an eyesore," she'd say, tapping her manicured nails against her clipboard. "We have property values to maintain." I explained as politely as I could that I needed the deliveries for work. But Linda didn't do reasonable. To her, my boxes were a violation of some unwritten HOA code, and she was hell-bent on pro-VYing it. Soon, she was everywhere. Every delivery truck that pulled up seemed to summon her like a moth to a flame. I catch her lurking across the street, jotting notes on her pad or snapping photos of my packages before I could grab them. She called it documenting violations, but it felt like stalking. The woman had too much time on her hands and way too much glee in making my life miserable over nothing. Then things got worse. Packages started vanishing. At first, I chalked it up to delivery mix-ups or porch pirates getting bold. But when a replacement package showed up in my backyard, battered like it had been drop-kicked, I knew something was off. I wasn't about to let this slide. I installed a security camera by my front door, angling it to catch anyone who got too close. When I checked the footage, my jaw hit the floor. There was Linda, bold as brass, strutting up to my porch in broad daylight. She grabbed my packages with this smug look like she owned the place and hurled them over my fence like they were trash. No hesitation, no shame, just pure, entitled confidence. My blood boiled. This wasn't just petty nonsense anymore. This was sabotage, and her latest VY-Tim was the one package I couldn't afford to lose. That shattered box in my backyard held my court-ordered meds, pills I had to take to stay compliant with my probation. Missing a dose wasn't just a health risk, it could land me back in a courtroom, or worse, behind bars. I scooped up the broken pieces, my hands shaking with rage and fear. This was no longer about neighborhood drama. This was serious. I dialed 911, my voice steady but urgent as I explained everything to the dispatcher. When the cops showed up, I laid it all out. The footage, the court documents, the works. Officer Daniels watched the VY Deo with a tight jaw, shaking his head as Linda's antics played out on my laptop. "This is something else," he muttered. They marched over to Linda's house, and when she answered the door, that fake smile was plastered on her face, like she thought she could charm her way out of anything. She laughed when they told her why they were there, while VYing a hand like it was all a big misunderstanding. "I'm just protecting the neighborhood," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "He's probably just stirring up trouble." But when Officer Daniels showed her the court papers and explained that the package contained legally protected medication, her face went ghost white. What she thought was a petty power trip was now a potential felony. The next few days were a blur. A detective got involved, and it turned out I wasn't the only one Linda had been harassing. Mrs. Larson down the street had reported her for rearranging her garden gnomes. The Thompsons complained she'd been measuring their grass with a ruler. Even the mail carrier had stories about Linda intercepting packages she deemed inappropriate. What I thought was my personal nightmare was actually a neighborhood-wide reign of terror. The HOA board, which had always seemed cowed by Linda's bulldozer energy, started backpedaling fast. The board president, Mark Thompson, called me to apologize, swearing they'd never given Linda permission to touch anyone's mail. She'd been acting on her own, wielding power she didn't have. Neighbors who'd been quietly enduring her nonsense started speaking up, and it was like the floodgates opened. Linda's empire of petty tyranny was crumbling. Then came a Tuesday that changed everything. I was in my home office, sipping coffee, when I heard sirens. I peeked out the window and saw 2 police cars parked at Linda's house. Detective Carter stepped out, followed by Officer Daniels, their faces all business. They knocked on her door, and when Linda answered, the charm was gone. No smile, no attitude, just a woman who knew she was in deep. They cuffed her right there, charging her with tampering with legal mail and interfering with a court-ordered medical regimen. As they led her to the cruiser, her perfect hair was a mess, her face flushed with shock and humiliation. Neighbors watched from their porches, silent, as the Queen of Pinewood Grove was dethroned. The Real kicker came out during the investigation, and it was better than I could have dreamed. Linda wasn't new to this game. Years ago, she'd been slapped with a court warning for meddling with legal documents in a CIVYL case. She knew exactly what she was risking when she tossed my packages, and she did it anyway. This wasn't ignorance or overzealous HOA pride, was deliberate defiance. Detective Carter told me her prior record, combined with this stunt, could mean up to 3 years in prison and fines as high as Law $25,000. When they laid out the charges and reminded her of her past warnings, Linda broke. She sobbed, claiming she was just protecting the neighborhood and didn't know the packages were important. But the footage didn't lie, and neither did her history. She'd gambled with my life and lost. Looking back, it's wild to think one woman's need for control could spiral this far. Linda wasn't just a nosy neighbor, she was a bully who thought she was untouchable. Her arrogance, her disregard for basic decency, and her outright contempt for the law brought her down. As I sit here now, package-free porch and all, I can't help but feel a grim satisfaction. Justice doesn't always come, but when it does, it hits hard. So what do you think? Was Linda just an overzealous busybody who got in over her head? Or was she a calculated menace who deserved every bit of what she got? Should HOAs have stricter oversight to stop people like her from abusing power? Or is this just one bad apple? And here's the big one. If you were in my shoes, would you have confronted her yourself before calling the cops? Or was going straight to 911 the only way to handle someone this unhinged? Drop your thoughts below. Hit that like button if you're as shocked as I was. And subscribe for more stories that'll make your jaw drop.